Hi and welcome to another very exciting tutorial. Today we're going to have a look at the Parse Local Data Store, which enables you to save data that would normally be stored in the cloud on your device. That means that if you are coming into an area where you have no internet connection, data displayed in your app won't actually disappear. It will simply load the data from the cache or from the local data store, and your users won't have the problem that as soon as they don't have an internet connection, that they don't can access any of their data anymore. So we're going to build a very simple demo application. But if you're not familiar with Parse at all, I'd recommend that you have a look at my channel's older videos, or have a look at my new website, brianadvent.com, where you can find all of my tutorials in a nice list. You can download the resources, and also you can search for the Parse tutorials, where you will find in-depth tutorials about creating a complete app and using Parse for it. And these videos are using an older Swift language syntax, but you can update them really easily by using the Xcode assistant. Also, make sure to subscribe to the free newsletter, where you will get updates on the news tutorials, other interesting stuff, new courses, and so on. So just enter your email address and sign up. And we're going to use the newest version of Xcode and Swift, of course, and also the newest version of Parse for this tutorial. And what we're going to do is really simple. This is a table view controller. It is our wall where we can post messages. Actually, everyone can post messages. You won't need to create a user ID or anything else. You will simply enter your name and your message, and then you can send the message, and it will appear in my list. So now let me show you what happens when I disable all connectivity. So actually, as you can see, the connectivity is completely disabled. I am in airplane mode, no Wi-Fi, and actually also no 3G or 4G connectivity, but since I'm using QuickTime, it gives me all the icons here. But my internet connection is definitely disabled, and once I press reload, you can see that I still get my messages. I can even enter a new message, and send it, and it appears at the beginning of our list. And once I re-enable my internet connection and I update, you can see that now it, for demo purposes, it disappeared because it has not yet resynced, but it was saved to the Parse cloud. So once I press sync again, it is going to be downloaded from the cloud again, and our cache is refreshed. So this is what we are going to do. To get started, you should go to your Parse dashboard and create a new application. I have already created one, which is called Swift Wall. And once you've created yours, you can select the quick start. And what you want to do here is select data, mobile, iOS, Swift. And then you can either create a new project or use an existing project. So when you should, for this tutorial, create a new project and download the blank Xcode project. And if you already have an application, then this existing application guide will give you everything you need to know, from importing all the necessary frameworks, which is listed here, from audio toolbox till system configuration. And then it is important to initialize Parse with your own application ID and with your own client key. So this is what you're going to need to get started. And also what we are going to download is the Reachability class, which you will get when you type in Reachability and Swift at Google, and then you will come to this GitHub project, which gives you a nice class and a very well documented class to check for internet connectivity or reachability. And we're going to use this class in order to see when your device is connected to the internet and when it is not. So go ahead and download the zip file here. You can also use CocoaPods if you want. And then we will move on. I will drag that to the desktop and we will close everything here. All right, I will tell you something about the local data store in a second. So now let's see. I've already created my my project here. I have imported all of the necessary frameworks and I have set up Parse and initialized it here. Make sure to import Parse if you're using an existing project, and set the application ID and the client key. And also, as I told you, there is quite many frameworks that you need to import here, frameworks and libraries, and then everything should be good to go. And also make sure that in your app delegate you call parse.enable local data store. And once you've done that, there are some implications that come with activating this local data store, which you can also see in the documentation. And they're actually pretty great. It's pretty great stuff what happens. So first of all, there are a couple of side effects of enabling the local data store that you should be aware of. So when enabling, there will be only one instance of any given PF object. So this is actually a good thing, but you should have it in mind if you would expect something else. Another side effect is that the current user and current installation will be stored in the local data store, so you can persist unsafe changes to these objects between runs of your app using the methods below. So everything regarding pinning and querying and so on can be done also with the PF user and PF installation objects, and they will be synced back to the cloud by calling the save eventually method on any PF object, and this will cause the object to be pinned in the local data store until the save completes. So if there is no internet connection and you call save eventually in your code, that means that it will your information won't get lost. It will be stored locally and then uploaded to the cloud as soon as possible. So now if you change the current PF user and call PF user current user save eventually, your app will always see the changes that you have made. So these are the side effects of enabling the local data store. So to get started, we will first of all import the Reachability class. So let's just quickly open this folder that we got from GitHub and open Reachability, and there's also a Objective-C header file, but we will only need actually our Reachability Swift file, and we will just drag and drop them to our project and make sure that copy items if needed and also add to targets and your project is selected, and hit finish. And with that class, we can now first of all check if there is an internet connection. And now that we are set up, let's deal with the user interface stuff. First of all, let's get rid of the standard view controller, and also let's delete the view controller.swift file in our project. So move it to trash. And then what we want to do is creating a table view controller. So just drag it to your screen, and then we will embed our table view controller by clicking on the controller and hit editor. We will embed it in a navigation controller. We don't have much of a navigation actually, but it helps us to directly be able to have a navigation bar here at the top, and then we can use our filter here, search for item, and use a bar button item here on the right side and on the left hand side. And one of them, this one, is going to be using the attributes inspector. We can simply tell it to be a system item, refresh, and here the right item, we will tell it to be system item add, and then we have both buttons that we need. Then there is our prototype cell. So let's make sure to select the table view cell here, give it a reuse identifier of cell, and then also what we want to do is telling the cell to be of this subtitle style to get both a title and a subtitle. We will use the title for the message content and the subtitle for the name of the sender. And then we will also need a table view controller class. So let's select app delegate, press Command N on the keyboard, and then we will create a new iOS Cocoa Touch class. And then we can leave the class name empty and simply tell it to be a subclass of UI table view controller, which gives us an initial class name. And then we can create this table view controller, and we should make sure to connect it to our storyboard file. So let's select the table view controller here, hit to the identity inspector, and tell it to be a custom class, and this should be the table view controller. What we also should do is connect both of the buttons with some actions. So let's first of all add an action for our add button. So let's say add message. Connection is going to be an action. And here the refresh button, let's tell it to be reload data, and also make sure this is an action. And then we have connected all of our buttons to our code file, the table view controller class, and then we can now we can deal with all of our reachability and local data store stuff. So first of all, what we want to do is creating a reachability property here. So reachability, it is of the type reachability, and let's make this optional. And then we will create, let me bring this did receive memory warning to the bottom. Let's also remove all of the stuff we don't need. We will only need table view self-row at index path. We will use that later. And then we can deal with the reachability stuff here directly below view.load. So let's create a function to set up reachability. Set up reachability. And we can give this some parameters if you need them, like a host name to check for a specific website. So let's make this an optional string. And then once we have our parameters set up, we can create a do try statement, and here initialize reachability depending on whether we have a host name or not. So this is the new error handling syntax. So we try the following. We try to check if a host name is available, or if it is nil. What we want to do is we want to use a reachability class and check for reachability for internet connection. And if we have a host name given as a parameter, we also use reachability, but with a host name which we have stated as the parameter, and we should unwrap that here. And now that we have our try statement here, we also need to make sure to catch the error. So we can use the reachability error class here and say that it failed to create with address. So here we will define a constant address. And if that happens, we'll simply print this address. So, and return so that we know further progress in our function, and then also a general catch block here. And now we have our reachability object here, and what we want to do with it is first of all set it to self reachability so that we can access it from other functions as well, because at the moment the scope is only in this do block. And then what we want to do is, here we do not need to error handle, so we will simply use try exclamation mark to tell Swift that we do not want to handle the errors here if we call self reachability and then start notifier, and then it ignores the throws option for an error. And now that we have created a reachability object and we are able to check if we are connected to the internet, we should also use an NS notification. So let's use the NS notification center, the default center, and add an observer for self. Let's state a selector, reachability changed colon, and the name is reachability changed notification, and we want to give it the reachability object here as a parameter, and then we will copy our function name and create this reachability changed function with notification and NS notification as a parameter. And then now that we have our function ready, we can again create a reachability object. So reachability, and we can use our notification and its object and cast it to a reachability object. And now that we have that, we can create an if statement and use our reachability here and check if it is reachable. So this would be the case if we're connected to Wi-Fi or a 3G or other cellular network. So we can further check if reachability is reachable via Wi-Fi. So let's print reachable via Wi-Fi, and else we can print reachable via cellular. And then if it is not reachable, we can add another else statement here. We can print not reachable. And since we want to make our parse calls depend on whether we do have an internet connection or not, we should also create another property for our table view controller class called connected, and give this an initial value of false. And then we can add here, every time we're connected to the internet, we can tell this property to be true, since then we are really connected to the internet. So connected equals false only when we are not connected. So let's have a look at how this works. And let me make sure that everything is set up. And let's run this. And we get one message here in our console: failed to instantiate the default view controller. And this is because once we head back to our main storyboard, we do not have an initial view controller at the moment. So let's select the navigation controller here, go to the attributes inspector, and tell it to be the initial view controller. Now let me run that again, and you won't see anything because it's running on my iPhone, but you will be able to see some console messages down here once we have also called our setup reachability function in view.load. So let me call setup reachability with no host name. That should do it. And let me rerun this. And now let's have a look at the console output. So as you can see, we have an internet connection. We are reachable via Wi-Fi. I will now activate the airplane mode. And now we're reachable via cellular, and then a second later we are not reachable at all. And now I will activate Wi-Fi again. As you can see, we're connected via Wi-Fi. And now I will do the same thing with the cellular network. So let me switch off the airplane mode, turn off Wi-Fi, and activate cellular, and head back to our app. And as you can see now, we are connected via cellular. And this is all we needed to do here. As you can see, a simple setup and a notification handler function here. And this is all we need to do to decide if we are connected to the internet or not. So let's move on and think about how to really add messages to our Parse database. So let's first of all have a look at our Parse app here. Let me head back to core. And then as you can see, I have 4 messages, and they have several keys like content and name or columns here in this table. And we will add messages using an alert controller. So let's go to our add message function. And first of all, create a message alert. And this is going to be a UI alert controller. Let's give it a title, not a nip name, a title, which is going to be new wall message. And then we will say enter your name and your message. Preferred style is alert. And then this alert controller needs two text fields. So let's add text field with a configuration handler. Give this parameter here text field, and then we will simply say text field dot placeholder equals your name, and then we will copy that, paste it here, and the second one is going to be your message. Then we will need 2 actions, so let's add alert, message alert, add action, UI alert action. It's going to be send message, default style, and our handler action here. And then we will first of all need our 2 text fields. So let's create name text field, and to get them we will use our message alert and the text fields, which is an array. So as we know, we have created the first text field that we created is the name text field, so we can simply use the first element from our array, and for the message text field we can use the last one, and that's it. And now we can start creating our message object for Parse. So let's create a message object, and this is actually the same thing that you would do with any other Parse enabled app, and we should make sure to import Parse to our class here. Make a quick build, and now we can use pf object, and we can simply create a class name or state a class name, which is message in our case. And then we can assign values to certain keys, like let's use message object, and let's use the key name and our name text field. Unwrap this and use our text property here. Then let's do the same thing for our content. Let's use the message text field, and again, its text property. In a real-world app, you should now actually check if there is content in these text fields or not, and then handle this by telling the user that he should first enter a name and content before sending this message. But to keep it simple, we will simply leave that out of our considerations right now. And then what we can do, first of all, is use our message object and call save eventually. And this saves as you can see here, this saves the object to the server at some unspecified time in the future, even if Parse is currently inaccessible. This means that right now, if we are not connected to the internet, it automatically pins our object and later uploads it to the Parse database. But to make sure that it is also pinned and usable for us, even if we have an internet connection, what we can do is use the pf object class and call pin all objects or pin all in background, and even get a block that can be performed afterwards, after the pinning process. And this requires us to give this function an array of PF objects. So we only have one object, but we will use it. And then in this block that we are going to use later, we will first of all give this a success parameter and an error parameter. And then we can already check if the error is equal to nil, then we can do something, but we will work with that later. So this is the one possibility that you have to explicitly tell Parse to pin an object or a list of objects in background. So, but we want to go one step further. I will now first of all cut this block here and again call pin all in background, and this time I'm going to use objects with name and the block. So let's use that. Again, give this a array of our one PF object, and then we will add our block here. And there is this with name, and this with name is great since we can tell it that this name should be messages. And later we can use this name to unpin, so remove many objects at the same time from our cache. So we can either save one single object and delete it manually later, or we can give it a tag or a name or a label, as Parse calls it, that we can use later to identify a bunch of objects that should be unpinned or deleted from our cache or our local database. So this is all we need to do to save messages. As you can see, it is all you need to do is use save eventually and the pin all in background, and then state all of the PF objects that you want to save in your local data store, even if it's only one. And we can then later, when we reload our cache, we can use these labels to identify all of the connected PF objects that we want to remove or unpin from our local data store. So now let's also make sure that this alert is displayed. So let's call self present view controller message alert should be animated, no completion block necessary. Let's also make sure to add one last action, UI alert action, which is going to be cancel. The style is also cancel, and we're going to give it an action if we need it later, so that we can also do something if we cancel our new message once we pressed on the plus button. So this was the first step. So the next step is going to be to load data into from our database in the cloud or from our local data store, and therefore we're going to create a new function right below view.load. Let's call this reload data. Oh, let's call it load data, not reload data. And what we also will need is an array of messages. So let's create an array of PF objects as a property, which we are going to use to store all of the messages that we download or query from our local data store. And to load data, we will, first of all, every time we load data, we will clear our messages array. So let's again use this initializer here to tell it that we want to create an array of PF objects. Let's also make sure that our query results are ordered. So let's tell it to be ordered by descending. Let's use the created add key to sort them. And now we can actually check if we have an internet connection or not, and then decide if we have an internet connection, we want to download all of the information and query for new results from the network, or we use our local data store. And first of all, we will check if we are connected. And the two things that we want to do is, first of all, query for new results from the network. And the second thing is we want to refresh our cache and update our local data store with the newest information that we can get from the network. So to do that, we will use our query and first of all, find objects in background. So now let's continue with the success block, which is a quite recently added new syntax that you can use in Parse to deal with asynchronous programming stuff. And they support so-called BF tags, which they created themselves, which makes working with asynchronous stuff really a lot easier once you get the hang of it. And we will use now this continuation block, which is only called if there was a success, because it says continue with success. And then we have a task here that we can use later. And we, as you can see, we also return an any object here. So when we return here, we can also call pf object and call another function, which is in our case unpin all objects in background with a name. And now this name is going to be messages. So to clear our cache, what we want to do is use this label that we created earlier, which is called messages, and use it to unpin all of the messages that were stored so far and replace them with new ones. And then again, we can continue with the success block. And this task is going to be ignored since we won't use it. And we can now actually replace, we now have unpinned all of our messages. We can replace them now. And we can also present all of the messages that are stored in the network database. We can display them with our table view controller. So first of all, let's update our messages array. And therefore, we're going to use the task that we have created here and use the task's results and cast it to an array of pf objects. Then we can update our table view controller, and since this all happens asynchronously, we have to use this patch asynchronously, and then we need to get the main queue, patch get main queue, and then we want to use our table view and reload data. And after we did that, we can return pf object. Now pin all in background. We do not need a block here to continue, so we can simply give this our array of self.messages, and now we have an updated list of messages in the cache, and we can again give it the name or the labels messages. And that's all there is to it. So now we have got all of our results from the network. We have updated our cache. So now we can think about what we want to do when we're not connected with the internet and when we want to use the local data store. Now, the only thing that we really need to do when we want to access the local data store, what we have to change on our query is simply tell it to be from local data store. And that's it. Nothing more. And then we can tell it tell the query to find objects in background. And then we can continue with let's not continue with the success block, let's continue with a block. And there we get our task. So just then you can see that we can also use a simple block without a success, so that you can check for yourself. Let's say if let error, and then we can use the task and its error object. And then we can simply print the error that occurred if one really occurred. And there it is. And then we can simply return that task. And we're done. And the second thing that we want to do is update our messages array. Again, use task and its result, and cast it to an array of pf objects. Then, again, we can use dispatch asynchronously, get the main queue, and in this block, we will use the table view and reload data. And at the end, we simply have to return the task again. Let's build that, and that should work. So as you can see, there is no big difference in accessing the local data store in comparison to accessing the network. You can simply use these BF tasks, and they really work great and really fast. So this is the first thing we wanted to do. Now we actually have everything in place. There are just some loose screws and bolts, like the reload data here. This function, let's call load data. At this point, then we have to configure the table view. So there is one section. Let's also remove those warnings here. There's one section, and the number of rows is actually the count of messages that were downloaded. And then we can also configure the cell, and therefore we will create a message object here, which will access our messages array with the index path and its row. And then we will use the cell and its text label and text, use message, access its content, cast it to an optional string, and let's do the same thing with the detail text label and its text property, and this is going to be the name. Let's also cast that to a string, and then we can return our cell. And now the last things that we need to do is, first of all, change the reuse identifier to cell here, so that we can dequeue the cell, since we have stated the reuse identifier earlier in the storyboard as cell. Also, we should use our load data function in Reachability, so that after we have checked if we are reachable or not, we can load data and then later decide in our load data function if we are connected or not, and then depending on if we're connected or if we have to get the data from our local cache. And we should also load data after we have like here, after we have pinned all in background. When we have created a new message, we can also call self load data. So this should be it. We could also make one thing happen, so that when we click on the add message button, that the user does not tap multiple times on that button. We can use our sender, cast that to a UI bar button item, then set this button's enabled property to false. And once we are completed with our adding of a new message, we can re-enable the button. And also when we have canceled the action, the alert in the alert controller. So let me bring up QuickTime and let's give this a try. And as you can see, our app works quite nicely. We have our already created messages that were downloaded from the internet. And now let me just quickly disable all of the network connections and rerun the app again. And as you can see now, we are in the airplane mode and still all of our messages are available. Now let's do the following. Let's create a new wall message. Again, here Brian, and I'll simply write offline. Let's send the message. And as you can see, it appears in our table view. But once I go into our Parse core library here and have a look at all of the new messages, you can see that my new message with offline is not visible. But now I'm going to turn on the internet connection again, and as you can see, it disappeared. But what happened here is the offline message suddenly appeared. And once I press on reload here, we also get our offline here. So this actually depends completely on where you set the load data function. You should set it at a position where it fits your needs. and you know now how to use the Reachability class, you know how to use labels in connection with the Parse Local Data Store, you know how to pin objects, you know how to unpin them, and you also know how you can use or set up a cache and refresh this cache. This should get you really going with a lot of different applications that I could think of. So have fun implementing the Parse Local Data Store in your own application.